Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back today. Today we've got Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. How are you doing today, Colonel?
Doing well. A little talked out, but I'm ready.
We need you. We need you on the front lines of the information war and to be handing out a little dose of sanity here and there. We need it badly.
Well, you may know that AI generated me now has got 8 different episodes on YouTube.
Subcontract your workout. That's the way to go.
Flattery, imitation.
Yeah. So obviously the world's in turmoil, to say the least. I was just talking with some friends yesterday, and I was wondering what you thought about what is Jordan's whole role in all of this chaos. And Jordan is just there, subservient to Israel, a neighbor to all of these Levant states. What are they doing, and why aren't they acting in their own interest, or are they Western owned, or what's going on here?
You're the first person in about 3 weeks to ask me any question at all about the good king and Jordan. I think I knew his father fairly well. In fact, I wear a watch from his father. I don't know the son that well, but I can say several things about Jordan, one of which is very important, and that is that they're sitting on top of, as his father used to say, I got about 300 loyal people who will fight for me, and I got 6 million Palestinians. I think it's more Palestinians now. It's more people that will fight for him. But principally, I think it's the fact that the son, and this is not true about the father. The father is, you may recall, the one state that we thought would be with us that didn't come into the war in 1990-91 against Saddam Hussein. Wouldn't come in. And it really made George H.W. Bush angry that the king didn't come in, but the king stuck to his guns. Turned out, I think, in the long term, he was more right than wrong. But his son is not that man, and he's bought and paid for by the United States. And that money is so absolutely essential for Jordan's economic survival, and indeed for its very survival period, that he won't back up on that. Whatever we say to do, he does. And, you know, when he's jumping up in the air, he says, how high you want me to go?
Yeah, and I find that interesting also that Lebanon and Hezbollah seem to not be helping each other whatsoever, and that they're constantly at odds, and that the Lebanese government turned away the Iranian diplomat or whoever was aiding them, right, and in negotiation with them, sent them away. So what's the relationship between these two parties?
Well, that's extremely convoluted, and you have to start, I think, with what Powell and I used to start with when we were talking about that. Usually we'd start with 82 and Ariq Sharon, defense minister at the time's invasion of Lebanon, and the very intent that Sharon had, and his prime minister too, to take Lebanon, to just outright take it, not just to kick the PLO out, but to take it. And they ran into a buzzsaw, and essentially we had to bail them out. But I think you have to understand that that's always been Israel's objective. They don't like the fact that Beirut used to be the Paris of the Mediterranean. Lebanon used to be one of the most successful economies in the basin, and they therefore would be a major competitor for Israel. Full of entrepreneurs, full of good business people, full of people who know how to work with other people in the region, know how to speak their languages and such. And they would be a huge competitor for Israel, and I think probably eventually would top them in terms of economic power in that region. They don't want that. So they periodically bomb Lebanon now. They periodically bomb everything, including their economic infrastructure. I wouldn't put it 2 cents past Jerusalem to have been the real power behind the explosion in the harbor that did so much damage to the shipping and the wharfing and everything in the very critical harbor there at Beirut. I wouldn't put it past them at all. No one's ever suggested that to me, and I still think it. So, because I know what Israel's objective is with regard to Lebanon. Now, coming to Lebanon's problem itself, they have the United States behind the Christians and everybody else that wants to play in the game behind the Muslims or the others, if you will. And that's a hell of a schism that we create immediately when we do that with a minority in the country rather than a majority. And it's an even bigger schism when we do like what we've just done, which is to build one of the most expensive and probably one of the largest by square footage embassies in the region, yes, in Beirut. And everybody knows what that embassy is housing. It's not just housing a country team with an ambassador. It's housing the CIA, Mossad, and MI6. And it's giving them enormous capabilities to spy throughout Central Asia, throughout the Levant, to Iran, all around. And that's what it's there for. It's not there for Lebanon or for diplomacy. It's there for spying and for direct action if necessary. So we're a problem in Lebanon because we almost always are allied with the minority group that happens to be the ones compatible with us, both religion-wise and capitalism-wise, I guess you would say. And the others who have to coexist with that are not happy with it, rarely form a government that's unified and will work. And then you got Hezbollah, which under Hassan Nasrallah, was actually becoming more political than it was fighting, than it was warrior. I don't call them terrorists because they're not terrorists. Terrorists have a specific definition, even in international law, and they're not terrorists. They're people fighting another people who are occupying a country close to them illegitimately, and occasionally stray into Lebanon, as we all know, and kill people in Lebanon. So they were becoming, though, under a very astute politician, Nasrallah, they were becoming more political than they were warrior. So you had this metamorphosis that was taking place, and I think Hassan Nasrallah, give him another decade and a half, would have been in the political structure to the point where he was probably the most powerful man in it. So that's why they killed him, probably. Not the fact that he was leading Hezbollah, but they wanted to take him out. Now they've got nothing but warriors, and so that's what they're fighting, and they're losing. They're getting their rear ends handed to them, just like they did in July of 2006. And they don't know how to extricate themselves other than to keep pounding with air power, keep pounding with tank power, keep pounding with bulldozers and so forth. They haven't honored a moment of the ceasefire, not a moment. They're still killing people every day.
And what's the there's a urgency to what, like you mentioned in another podcast I saw, you're saying that Netanyahu is much dumber than he appears because strategically what he's doing now is just suicide. So what's with the urgency of Israel doing all this now? Do they really think they're going to maintain this greater Israel project through what they're doing, or won't they become pariahs on the world stage and not, ultimately be defeated by Iran?
The latter, I think. But we've moved. I wouldn't call Netanyahu dumb or stupid. I think he's one of the most evil men on earth. But I won't call him stupid or dumb. He's much smarter than Donald Trump, for example.
Sure, that's a low bar.
That's a low bar, yeah, right. But your point is well taken. I think he's now, given the opposition, and it's worse than him in some respects, but given what's happening to him politically and personally, I think he's blinded now by the fact that not only does he still want to be the savior of Israel, the man whose golden statue goes up in Jerusalem, I saved you from Nebuchadnezzar II, that sort of thing. Besides that, he wants to survive personally. And I think he's in jeopardy of that if he leaves the political arena. And he should be leaving because elections are supposed to happen. And it's looking like from the polls that Lapid and Bennett will probably beat him if they stick to their guns, and one of them is actually the candidate and the other one is a subordinate. So I think he's desperate now, and that's a dangerous man, a smart, desperate man.
Yeah, I guess we're gonna find out, right? Time will tell. How's it changed over the course of your life? Before Henry Kissinger died, he said, the American foreign policy has no aim. We don't even know why we're doing it. But is it like the Smedley Butler thing? Is war a racket? Are we just getting into wars because it suits us? And how has this changed over the course of your career, seeing how it used to be? And from 2003, and also your dad being in the services, How has the foreign policy shifted over all these years?
I think it took a major shift, and it's easy to explain in some ways and very difficult in others, very complex. It shifted when H.W. Bush actually began to change his own policy in his last year, at least partially with regard to Russia and how Russia was going to be treated. And then Bill Clinton took over and was totally inexpert, showed it in the first year or two when he made mistake after mistake. And into those mistakes poured a lot of people who saw an immature, inexperienced president whom they could exploit. And it happened all the way up to 9/11, at which time another inexperienced president took charge, or had just taken charge, and had a team that was very mixed. And they didn't do any better. In fact, they exacerbated the situation. And by that, I mean, we thought we were truly in a unipolar moment, that we were all powerful, could dictate to the world and get whatever we wanted, didn't need international law, didn't need the UN, didn't need anything in the world except ourselves. 9/11 disabused us of that. We struck out violently to get that disabuse mollified. We struck out with another inexperienced president who had a very experienced team behind him, but it was a very divided team. And we've been that way ever since. We've been inexperienced. We've been divided. We haven't had talented people in the government. And even when we had talented people, they were focused where they shouldn't be focused, like Sullivan and Blinken, who were focused almost exclusively on Israel, and Biden, who was focused exclusively on Ukraine. And you could say, and I would make an argument for this even on occasion, that Sullivan and Blinken understood finally what was happening as a result of our inexpert handling of the end of the Cold War. And that was that power was shifting inexorably toward the East. And the magnet for that power was China. Well, what they decided to do, Biden, Blinken, and Sullivan, was over Ukraine, using Ukraine, contest that movement of power. And the first target, of course, was Russia. We actually accomplished the opposite of what we wanted to, push Russia into China's hands. But that was okay, because then they just decided, well, we'll take them both on at the same time. And that's what you see happening right now, this minute. You see from the Arctic Ocean, where we're trying to stir up a fight, to the Baltic, where we've got the northern states of NATO trying to stir up a fight, to Ukraine, where, thank you very much, we got a fight, to the Caucasus, where we're trying to stir up a fight, particularly in Georgia, and on down to Iran, where we got another active fight. It's all trying to build some kind of fence that China can't penetrate. And if you know anything about China's Base Road Initiative and the 5 railroads associated with it, you understand from a geopolitical point of view, a geographic point of view, exactly what I'm talking about. Because these rail lines, for example, the land ones that come out of the eastern ports of China and traverse north, north-south, south, or central north, what I would call north, central north, south north, if you will, and then the one down in Iran, which is extremely south. The ones above that, the ones above the Caucasus, they reduced Pacific port travel time from 2.5 to 3 days by maritime routes to 16 hours by rail.
Wow.
That is a hell of a change. That's a hell of a change. That's the old imperial great game, you know, when you get that kind of route and you undercut everybody else's costs, you're going to rule the world pretty soon.
largest landmass on Earth, you know, the Eurasian Peninsula. Yeah.
And that southern one now debouches in Iran, and it's 25 hours for those ports. So it cuts costs, is totally over the land. And guess who controls the seas for most times? The empire that controls the seas is us. So China's obviating that advantage. All its commerce is going to move over rail. Very good rail, very fast rail. 16 hours across the Central Asian plain and 25 hours to get into Ukraine or get into Iran.
Yeah.
25 hours to Bandar Abbas from China's eastern ports.
Yeah. And they can do it overnight because they have a government that allows them to do this.
Yes.
That, and build overnight. And I think that what we're doing is the economic situation, the economy is eating itself like a snake eating its tail. We're hollowing out our own everything and turning everything into a casino. But really, what's going to happen to my fear is that, they came up with this big red map that said we're going to own everything in North America and South America up to Greenland, all the way down to Venezuela, including Cuba. Are they going to be able to take Cuba? Are they going to be able to, is Delcy Rodriguez going to continue to let them do business in Venezuela? And what's going to happen to Maduro?
Well, that's a good question. What's going to happen to the assassin that we think we know about in Pennsylvania, and the assassin that we think we know about with Charlie Kirk, and the assassin that we think we know about now with Donald Trump again? And what about the golf course assassin?
You can't say it's not entertaining. At least you don't have to spend money on movies anymore.
The New York Times reported 300,000 contacts, emails, telephone calls, whatever, that doubted the situation at the Capitol or at the Hilton.
Yeah. That's a country that has ceased to believe anything because they know they're getting lied to. So give me the story about the aliens, and that'll at least give me something to chew on.
You got it. But to your point, I think we're at a crossroads right now to a certain extent. Russia's already violated the Monroe Doctrine twice now. They sent Kirov and a nuclear submarine into Havana Harbor. They now have sent one tanker. It offloaded at Matanzas with plenty of oil for Cuba. They are sending a tanker behind that. Erdogan is supposedly sending a floating electricity boat, one that'll provide them with power and the things they need to run their coffee operations and so forth. So, I mean, the Monroe Doctrine is dead, right? The Trump Doctrine is dead. And I don't know if Donald knows it, but you're right. The incredible claims we have made have done nothing but hurt us. Greenland hurt us. Doing what we did to Cuba has inspired Russia and Turkey to take some action. They knew Venezuela and Brazil were sort of handicapped. They usually were the saviors of Cuba because Cuba was giving them doctors and nurses and so forth. And so they exchanged heavy fuel oil for that. Pretty good deal going on. I met many of the doctors in Cuba. Very, very smart people. Very, very good doctors. Very, very good Reeves Brigade. 3,000 people armed with hypodermics, ready to go anywhere, particularly into the poor areas, into South Africa, into Rio de Janeiro, into the barrios in Venezuela, and to deliver healthcare where their own indigenous doctors wouldn't go. So it was a good deal for everyone in the region, and Cuba got life-saving heavy fuel oil and other things in exchange. We killed all that. We scared them so badly they wouldn't continue the operations, and of course,
flipped Honduras as well. Yeah. Got them to kick them all out.
Yeah, and you know what we did to Venezuela. So Cuba is full of the most. I've been on that island up until 2012, I guess, 9-10 times. Working for President Obama for part of the time, trying to get a rapprochement, which we got, a slight one between Raul Castro and President Obama. We had flights going down there, we had ships going down there, and we then Trump came in and reversed everything. But it was reviving itself in a way that was probably disciplined, if you can call predatory capitalism ever disciplined. Because what was happening were remittances. I mean, huge amounts of money were pouring in from Florida Cubans who wanted a piece of the action. They were backing restaurants, auto repair shops. You suddenly started seeing modern Toyotas, instead of 57 Chevrolets on the streets of Havana. And it was recovering a little bit, but it was protecting what it had gained, a 99% literacy rate, good health care. You could get your cataracts removed in about an hour. Didn't have to pay $3,000 to do it and wait 2 weeks for it to be done. So now we've ruined that. And if it weren't for Russia and Turkey now weighing in like they did, we probably would have a real catastrophe on the island, because Melissa struck, and Melissa wiped out 15,000 homes overnight. They had no power. They had no potable water. My group, the Eisenhower Media Network, Ben Cohen of Ben and Jerry's, myself and others, sent some solar powered generators down to Santiago de Cuba because that's the heart of the coffee business. And they were able to get some of their coffee apparatus back up running with the power that provided. But other than that, and now Russia and Turkey, maybe we'll save the island. I don't know. A lot of Cubans were leaving. They were just finally giving up.
Yeah. And we do this thing in the United States where we point our fingers at the Cubans, 200,000 Cubans coming over the border and stuff, but nobody talks about the sanctions in the news and explaining why these countries are in dire economic stress anyways, include Iran as well. This is the old imperialist trick, and the media has always sort of manufactured consent in that way. You were talking about Blinken. The old way of doing things was to drive a wedge between Taiwan and China, which is also, what do you think? Doesn't look like it's going to go their way anymore. It doesn't look like the United States is going to continue to be able to drive that wedge. You had the opposition leader from Taiwan come over to the mainland and make an appearance for the first time ever. What do you think is going to go on there, Colonel?
First of all, China doesn't want a war with Taiwan. China knows it's inevitable that Taiwan will move closer and closer and closer to the mainland, and I think it is. Of course, you've got the Kuomintang there who are more or less in favor of some sort of closer relationship. And then you got the independents like Chen Shui-bian represented when I was in the State Department, and we had to spend, Powell and the State Department had to spend every other week going to Taipei or getting Doug Powell, our representative in Taipei, to disabuse Chen Shui-bian of what Rumsfeld and Cheney were telling him. So that was a portfolio Powell had that people don't even know about. He really prevented Taipei from crossing a red line with China. But since that time, there has been a lot of talk, and the talk has been about chips and technology and Fujian province and the huge exchanges that take place among those. And I just don't think they want a war. One day they'll pick up the phone and Xi Jinping or his successor will call Taipei and say to the leader there, let's merge. And it won't be like Hong Kong, I promise. And they'll probably live up to that promise. And finally, Taiwan will be under the mandate of China. Yeah. And it'll be peaceful.
I wonder, it might be like a Hong Kong situation. They integrated.
They didn't like the British. They didn't like the British, and that's what Hong Kong was all about. And the British are still there mucking around. So
really?
Oh yeah.
I thought they'd be gone by now.
Well, read the last Jean Le Carré books, and you'll think they are, but they ain't.
At least I saw when China came in, they did start to clamp down on some of the ridiculous housing problems that are going on in Hong Kong, and they just tried to give it more the Chinese, rundown, scrub it up Chinese style, and give subsidies and give people help where they need it and stuff. And it looks like the Cold War, actually, the communists, I think they won, right? It appears that way.
You can make that case. You can make that. What was it Xi Jinping just said in his edict? Capitalism with Chinese characteristics has triumphed in most areas of state power. I'm not doing the Mandarin justice, but the only one we have not triumphed in, and the American media has not picked up on this in any significant way. The only one we haven't triumphed in is the financial sector. And now we're going to concentrate on that. And then he goes on to say, we're going to substitute the renminbi for the dollar. I mean, it's there. Wow. It's there. And they have fulfilled, since Deng Xiaoping, 1984, my first trip to China, they have fulfilled every promise that a leader has made in regard to capitalism with Chinese characteristics.
Wow. So what can you really attribute to that? Is it the Mao killing a bunch of people? Did that help? Or what set the stage to where they could pull this off and that we can't? 5-year plans and stuff.
It's way too simplistic, but I think Mao's errors and mistakes, particularly in the Cultural Revolution, set up Deng Xiaoping. And when Deng Xiaoping got in and was empowered, he did things like take a look at the rare earth metals in the world and say, for example, in 1984, I think it was 84, we're going to buy them all. And we're going to have 95% of them. And we're going to use that leverage. And that's what he did.
Wow.
And, you know, other people have rare earth metals. Australia has gazoods of them. So do we. But China made it so uneconomical for us to mine and process them, and for Australia to do the same, and Canada to do the same, that they cornered the market. Because for them, they made such a mass market out of it that it was economical for them not only to mine them, but to process them too. And that's what they've done throughout key sectors of the economy, global and otherwise, so that now they really only need their own 1.4, 1.5 billion people to buy their products to survive. They don't need the rest of the world. They don't want that. They want to diversify. You know, they don't want just their own people, autarky, whatever you call it. They don't want just their own people to be the reason their markets exist. But if they had to in a pinch, they could survive. Think we could do that?
I know Victor Gao has said, he said, aren't you afraid you're going to lose the American market? And he said, we don't need the American market. And I think it's true. But then it's a sheer number thing, population-wise, that allows them to do what they do. But do you think outsourcing also, obviously, that shot us in the foot? We moved all the factories over there. All of a sudden, they become privy to the way things are done. The innovations come right out of the factories. I mean, what else can you really attribute it to? Well, how bad we're failing?
Their first stealth fighter came right out of the F-117. They stole all the data.
Really?
Or some people have told me Lockheed gave it to them.
Yeah, sold it for a high price. Yeah. Well, that's the thing in America. Everything's got a price. You know.
Yep. Yeah.
What was the quote you had from the Raytheon guy recently, who's just obviously doesn't? It's all about money for him. It's not about
Yeah, I mean, he actually said at a shareholders meeting something to the effect of, "War's our business, and business is good."
Yeah, I think this goes across all sectors and all industries in the United States. Is that this hollowing out of everything? We're closing down hospitals, and to save money, we're not doing. Private equity is asset stripping, old folks' homes, and then they're not doing ambulance transfers because so every little buttress between us and total collapse, they're selling to the highest bidder, and it's fascinating. I just don't know how long do you think this can go on before the economy crashes?
Not very long. And, one of the things they're trying to do that it appalls me, they're trying to privatize the VA because they see all that money going to waste in their eyes being spent by the government on veterans. They want to spend it, they want a veteran to have his cataracts removed for $3,000, not $500.
You read about the fellow who was going to get deployed to Iran and ICE came and kidnapped his fiance.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Yeah,
there have been some egregious treatment we have quite a few foreigners in our military who serve under a policy we've had for a long time, all the way back to George Washington. If you serve honorably and you are discharged honorably, you gain your citizenship.
Wow.
I had two in Vietnam in my unit who were one Australian and one Honduran who were serving in the military in combat. Because it only took a year in combat, and you got your citizenship.
Crazy. They came over stateside.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Vietnam. So what was that? What was that like? Can you tell me?
Insanity.
I had to ask. You brought it up. I thought, holy shit.
I was a first lieutenant and a captain there, and I was an aviator, so I was flying these little aircraft that flew around in front of the infantry and drew enemy fire. And then the infantry went in and tried to take care of the enemy. And by the time I got there in March of 69, Tet had happened. Tet of 68 had happened. So there were no more VC around, roughly. I maybe saw in 13 months, a dozen VC, Viet Cong, formerly known as the National Liberation Front. Well, what Ho Chi Minh and General Giap had done, of course, beautiful strategy, which worked like a charm. They allowed Tet to happen, the Tet Offensive to happen. And the first objective, of course, was if it works, then we've beaten the Americans on the ground in South Vietnam. If it doesn't work, it'll be because they've defeated the NLF, the Viet Cong. We don't want them anyway, because most of them are Southerners. So we'll win then.
Wow.
So once they're wiped out, then we'll get regular NVA units, which they promptly did, invade South Vietnam and drive the Americans out. And we won't have any opposition in South Vietnam because we wiped out the guerrillas. It worked.
Not bad.
It
Not
worked.
bad.
Over 10 plus years, it worked. We're gone and they own the country now.
Yeah. Good for them. Good for them. Sounds like they're doing better than we are. So
yeah, but not good for those 58,000 plus names on the wall over there.
Sure, absolutely. So you go on, you're not you're a typical colonel. You obviously had a Smedley Butler moment or something. What was when you started to have these second thoughts about the U.S. System and all these things?
I was stupid. I was not a very smart person. It took me to when I joined Powell and saw what happens at the top. I spent 12 years at the top of the power circle in the U.S. and military and civilian. And what I saw was very depressing, very depressing. First of all, I saw a lot of people who didn't know what they were doing. And two, I saw a lot of people who were doing it for money, either inside or outside. When you watch a four-star general in charge of a program inside go out and join Lockheed Martin, for example, after retirement, a year or two after retirement, he's making at that time maybe $900,000 $1 million for going to 2 board meetings once a year, twice a year, something like that. Then you understand how corrupt this system is. And you understand that the real motivation for our wars, constant wars, particularly since about 9/11, is money, making money. And it has infected the military too, especially the top ranks of the military, who just walk right out the revolving door, go to work for Lockheed, go to work for RTX, old Raytheon, go to work for Grumman, go to work for Boeing.
What are these companies getting out of these guys coming on? Is it information or just approval? Or
Powell used to say they get the Rolodex. You know the old term Rolodex.
Yeah.
But they also get something more insidious than that. For example, there was one really egregious one in Afghanistan where the guy was a 3-star general. He was working with helicopters sold by Bell, and he goes and retires, comes back to the United States. I think he got a job there for a few months, retired, went to work for Bell and became the principal person dealing with selling Bell helicopters to the Taliban or to the Karzai government. So he can't make this stuff up. It's just,
oh my God.
It's like Rome under, I won't say Caligula or Nero. I'll say one of the emperors between Julius Caesar, the establishment of the empire, and Suetonius. Probably the most debilitated. Epstein, think Epstein the whole time.
I had to go back and watch Decline of Empires. Let me go back in history. And during the time of Caligula stuff, at the very end, public acts of necrophilia where you were supposed to come out and cheer on these people committing these acts. We're almost there. Just with a few extra twists.
No, it's really it's shameful where we are.
It's grotesque and dangerous because I don't think that we're committed whatsoever to peace, that we're going to take as many people out as we can as we go down. And then you have, of course, the Samson doctrine in Israel, which kind of is a metaphor for the whole thing. I think they really do. They'll take everybody down with them when we go. And I hope that's not true. And I hope the communists win. They seem nice.
I hope you're right too, but I'm very fearful of Netanyahu resorting to that, particularly if he gets his back up the wall and he has no other alternative.
Yeah.
In 73, it may be that she was just doing it for public consumption, but when a BBC reporter asked Golda Meir when it looked rather dicey with the Egyptian Third Army in 73, Yom Kippur War, Golda Meir didn't bat an eye, told him, yeah, I'd use a nuclear weapon.
Crazy from the get-go, that state, I tell you what.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, you've been a good sport coming on here and talking to you're exhausted. Come back and do this again. I really appreciated your time and your insight. You're obviously one of the most interesting people I've probably had on the show. I had quite a few good people, but you're definitely have a lot of good insight. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson, check him out. You can find him on the internet all the time. He's on all the podcasts. You can check him out anytime. We'll sign off. We'll talk right after this. Bye, everybody.
Take care.